Hello and welcome to Braver Leaders, the podcast. In this episode, I'm going to talk about moral intelligence in relation to leadership. To do so, I'm going to summarise a summary of a book about moral intelligence and also discuss the essential underpinnings of this idea, this concept. So, to begin, what I'm going to do is quote from an article about moral intelligence. So this is an article summarising the book Moral Intelligence, which was written by Doug Lennick and Fred Kiel. There's more than one theory about moral intelligence out there, but one of the most popular, if not the most popular theory construct is by Lennick and Kiel, who are again addressing the subject from the perspective of leadership. But of course, I've always argued that we're all leaders. We're leaders of self. And so I think this stuff applies to each and every one of us. But it might be interesting to consider how this applies or not to a lot of the leaders that we see around us today. So this article is by Emir Zekovic, 2017. And again, it's a summary of the book, which I'll summarise. So let me begin. What is moral intelligence? This is not the whole summary, by the way. I'm just picking out some bits and pieces. Moral knowledge is the ability to follow proper norms, it says here, and live ethically by applying certain principles that act upon your personal beliefs, values, and objectives. The difference between moral intelligence and IQ lies in idiosyncrasy. So, I'm actually not sure about that. So it starts off by saying moral knowledge. Yes, I think we have to have knowledge about morals to apply them, but I also believe that some of that may be innate. I'm not sure that the difference between moral intelligence and IQ lies in idiosyncrasy. I'm not sure actually what that means. I say that IQ, most people have heard of, is a measure, and there's different ways to measure intelligence, but it's essentially problem solving. It's linguistic and numerical capability. And also we have culture fair IQ tests, which allow people just to answer questions, to see if they can solve puzzles, which may be involved in shape sorting, for example, moving things around in a mind mentally. So it is still testing acuity. Most of the IQ tests do rely on verbal reasoning and, to a degree, numerical skills, but there are culture fair. But to say that the difference between IQ and moral intelligence is idiosyncrasy, I don't quite get. And also, already in this introduction, it says follow proper norms and live ethically. And I would suggest that ethics and morals, although they're often mixed up, are slightly different. I think a moral code is almost like an intuitive, instinctive gut reaction to things. It's a code that if we break, we feel lousy. And we can all have differences of opinion about what that code looks like. But I would also suggest that many people in any given culture would tend to agree with most things. This is why we can have things like moral outrage. We've heard of this. Ethics, on the other hand, whilst there is a big overlap between morals and ethics, well, ethics tend to be those things that are codified. They can be legislated for or against. And I think that's the difference. The ethics can be outside of us, and morals tend to be within us. It's our moral code, and as I've suggested, there can be an overlap. Anyway, so let's move on with the little article. So Moral Intelligence, the book, indicates that morality is the only path success and prosperity lies upon. I'm guessing. I think there's a bit missing in that sentence. And it says here that Lennick and Kiel, the authors, embrace a broader perspective. They want to expand the reader's knowledge of morality by presenting unique stories and personal examples. So again, I think that's a nice plug for the book, which I would encourage you to read if you want more information. I'm not going to do the book justice here, but I do want to pose some of these questions about morals and leadership. So, how to act. Just like any other knowledge, morality is something that can grow in time. I would agree with that entirely. I think that the more we mature, the more we realize our place in the universe and the time that we have, then those morals and acting in alignment with them become more and more important. So, key lessons from Moral Intelligence, the book, based on this summary. Don't rush. Emotions are just temporary sensations. Absolutely. So here we abut and overlap with emotional intelligence. So definitely, particularly in leadership situations. But again, for all of us in life, how many people do you know who have a real hard time because they cannot seem to manage effectively their emotional state? So don't rush here. Again, I'm presuming that the author means don't be impulsive. Great idea for a leader. Morality comes from the top. Absolutely, morality does come from the top in a business, in an organization. That doesn't mean to say that in any given team, structure, community, that it is not up to everyone. It is up to everyone to behave in a moral and, of course, ethical way. But the top can heavily influence the culture. So, here's some quotes. A morally intelligent organisation is one whose culture is infused with worthwhile values and whose members consistently act in ways aligned with those values. This is from the book. Again, obviously in the book, the authors expand on this. I think values are hugely important. The values and what we would consider to be moral should align. And if they don't, then this thing called cognitive dissonance can be set up between how we feel and how we're meant to act in any given business, team, organisation. And that can cause people an awful lot of stress. So I would agree with that. Without some context, values are neither moral nor immoral. Yeah, but I could probably disprove that if I thought about it long enough. So let's say, generally speaking, the problem with that is that when you go a bit deeper, then you could argue that morals are neither moral nor immoral. And again, I think one could say that that's true, except that I believe that most people are good. And I believe that most of us have an innate sense of things like fairness, for example. And you can see this. There's a lot of studies done with animals who seem to notice when they get less food than somebody else and can count sometimes in a rudimentary way, sometimes in quite a sophisticated way. So I think there's something innate about morals for some people, most people, but not all. While moral intelligence involves knowing what to do, moral competence is the skill of actually doing the right thing. So now we begin to see from the beginning when this moral knowledge part came in, and I was saying, well, yeah, knowledge, but on its own, so we need to do something. So yes, I agree here. Moral intelligence involves knowing what to do. Moral competence is the skill of actually doing the right thing. Fair enough. And doing the right thing is very important. I've talked about that a lot. In the simplest terms, moral intelligence is the ability to differentiate right from wrong as defined by universal principles. Don't know what that means, as in universal principles, but maybe it actually is saying the same thing as I was saying already, which is that there's an innate goodness in most people, and therefore maybe there's an innate goodness in the universe. Many psychologists believe that neonate responsive crying is the first indication of an inborn capacity for empathy. Maybe. Many psychologists could be wrong. Many psychologists could be right. So, could be. Anyway, that's kind of an overview, which is, I think, rather nice. I mean, thanks to the guy for doing it. It of course it's not complete, and I think that's a good idea because it means that you want to understand a bit more, and therefore will buy the book, which is a great idea. I'm not on commission, so let's then go to this idea of competencies in moral intelligence. And Lennick and Kiel talk about integrity, responsibility, forgiveness, and compassion. So let's think about these, and let's then compare those in your mind with leadership behaviours that you see around right now. So are our leaders morally intelligent? Let's begin with integrity. So the idea here is to create harmony between what we believe and how we act, doing what we know is right, always telling the truth. So again, there's a slightly fuzzy area here for me that we create harmony between what we believe and how we act. But that means there are beliefs, I suggest, have got to be underpinned by those values, and those values have got to be in direct alignment with what we consider to be moral. Again, that's just my take on it. But let's just imagine that doing what is right means some of the basics. Don't harm other people. Do unto others as you would do to yourself, as long as your self-talk's good. Sometimes we do the opposite of that. Thou shalt not kill. And we should not diminish other people. We should not look at others askance. We should not other others. We should not think in a superior way, etc. And so I think that's important. But if we then consider that integrity, just that idea of integrity, is about doing the right thing, then I would totally agree with that. What I think we need to expand is what is doing the right thing. But then think about those politicians that you know, that you've seen in action, in operation. How many of them, by many measures that you and I and millions of other people would agree upon, actually do the right thing? And I think this is where we can see that by using this to shine a light on some leadership behaviours, that probably we can come to the conclusion that they're not doing the right thing, because that seems morally wrong. Again, was there a goodness in what they did, or was there a badness, is perhaps one way to consider it. And I think there's a badness around right now. And always telling the truth, ha 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 ha. Excuse me while I lie on the ground on my back and kick my legs around in the air as I chortle uncontrollably. Truth seems to be a very movable feast these days and in short supply. And people talk about, their truth, meaning their experience, meaning what happened to them. That's a phenomenological thing. Great. But truth, well, we need to look at it from different perspectives and triangulate as best we can and see if it is verifiable. Sometimes we can't always say for certain, but we can become darn close. But I think what we see these days is nothing like it. I think it's not even opinion. It's subterfuge and cunning and lies. What do you think? Responsibility, taking personal responsibility, admitting mistakes and failures, embracing responsibility for serving others. So once again, very laudable, taking personal responsibility, absolutely. I was in charge, it was up to me. Admitting mistakes and failures, that would be good in real time. I think sometimes we see politicians and other leaders on the world stage and in business saying, yeah, it was a mistake. That's after the event. How much of that did you know at the time? I think you did know at the time, and I just think you hid it. So saying mea culpa now, I find it quite disgusting, actually. And embracing responsibility for serving others, again. Well, I've said it before, I'll say it again. How many leaders do you see who seem to understand it is about service? It is about serving others. It's not that shape in our organisation, it's that shape. They are at the bottom in that sense, to make the environment as good as they possibly can, to encourage people, to coach people, to mentor people. I think we're seeing the antithesis of this right now, and it is, in my opinion, a bit disgusting. Not all leaders, but an awful lot of them. Forgiveness, letting go of one's own mistakes. Well, they'd like to do that. They would like to do that, wouldn't they? Yeah. But I think there's a difference between letting go of one's own mistakes. Forgiving self is really what this is saying, to forgive ourselves. I think that is healthy. I think for a lot of us it's difficult, but I think to move on. The challenge I've got is that letting go of one's own mistakes, with some of the leaders we see around us, seems to be about passing the buck and pointing the finger and blaming others, or at least spreading the blame. So here, yes, attempt to forgive yourself so you can move on and do more good. Great idea. But once more, I think a lot of us struggle with that. Letting go of others' mistakes may be easier to do. Maybe that's something that we could all home in on for our own self-leadership journey. Letting go of others' mistakes. Yes, let's do that. But is it easy? No. How many people in leadership positions do you think have let go of others' mistakes? They may say so. Very often they don't. But I can't help but feel that those people who don't do the right thing, don't tell the truth, don't take responsibility, are probably not really letting go. They're not forgiving. I think they're probably harbouring some bits and pieces behind the scenes, or a lot of stuff. But that's just a guess. However, for us, forgiveness, great idea. Of self and others, if at all possible. Maybe that's the key, isn't it? If we want to get better at forgiving others, at forgiving those who've trespassed against us, then we have to forgive ourselves. Last one of these competencies, as described in this brief synopsis here. Compassion, actively caring about others. And once more, if I think of what I see around on the world stage, business leaders, thought leaders, sometimes, not all, politicians, again, not all, do they care? I think they attempt to grab and maintain power and influence and find other ways to become more powerful, to become richer, to have more influence. They do that by saying they care. It's to keep you safe. It's all about you. I just want to help you. We're here to help. And don't know about you, but a lot of that just doesn't sound remotely true to me. That seems like not telling the truth. Back to integrity. And to flip back around to integrity and to finish this off, if you consider one definition of integrity, always doing the right thing, even when no one else is looking, more and more it would seem that things happen behind the scenes that we're not aware of. And then we're presented with ideas, sometimes simultaneously, in different countries by different leaders. It's almost as if they were talking. Maybe not. Could be a coincidence. But anyway, actively caring about others. How many people do you see? Let's say your theatre of leadership observation. You can go into a theatre, and on that stage are all the leaders that you would consider are potentially impactful in your life. Again, business, politics, it could be community, could be education, whatever. All those people, how many of them, what percentage do you think actually care about anything other than themselves? I don't know what my percentage would be. I'd have to sit and think about it. But sadly, I think those who actually care, it's less than 50%. Maybe I'm being generous. So with that thought, maybe it's time for all of us to demand more and more and more that we have transparency, we understand decision making, what is going on behind the scenes. Politicians, leaders are not allowed to evade those questions consistently. We need to support those people in positions of authority, power, and influence, wherever they are. Really support them if they are moral, if they demonstrate ethical behaviour, and if they actually care. And the rest of them, well, let's do what the Amish do. We should shun them.